So I cut myself off of my 57-minute video. I have to start a new one. Well, as I was saying, talking about the bolt holes of this lathe for the feet. The 7x14 lathe has a bolt hole on either side of the foot at the headstock and at the tail end. This one does not. It's got one bolt hole on either end, and that makes it difficult to shim underneath the feet because you have one bolt hole, which means that the lathe can shimmy. If it's shimmed on one side, when you bolt it down, there's not enough holding power for one bolt in the center on each end to keep it from shimmying. Okay, so I didn't put the shims underneath the feet. They're underneath the tray, the waist tray. So, and that's better because the lathe does not, well, as you can see that when I'm moving it right now, it does move a little bit. I do not tighten down the bolts like as tight as I can because really these small lathes, there's a little bit of a deception in the idea that the beds will warp. Actually, they will not warp. Anything that's, I would say, 17 by 18 or 8 by 18 and under is not going to warp on you. This concern is mainly for lathes with a much longer bed, that's say 23 to 100 inches. These ones here absolutely have to be leveled because it's easier for the beds to warp. These little ones, because they're so much shorter, and the mass of the bed, it's such mass compared to the length, you're not really going to get any warpage. And my friend Keith Appleton proves this point because he bought a Warco. I think it's a 7x16 or 8x16, or it's a 7x14 Warco. They're green. They're in the UK. He bought one from his friend, my friend Keith, to put it in his other workshop, and he's just using it for little jobs, little things. And he's mounted his on a couple of pieces of foam he bought from Amazon. They're knee pads. Okay, and he hasn't even got it bolted down, and he's running it that way. He says there's no way this thing's going to warp. It's sitting in these pads, and he's doubled. The pads are like 1 inch thick or 2 inches thick, and he says there's no way it's going to warp. It's sitting on the pads. But here's the thing: Keith is even wrong about that. It wouldn't warp anyway because of the mass of the bed. Only Keith has a big lathe in his shop which is leveled, and his other smaller lathe is leveled. But these lathes are much bigger than this, and these are really designed not to be bolted down anyway. The 7x14 comes with rubber mounts, as you all know. Now I have rubber mounts for the 7x14 now. Maybe at a later date I might drill some holes in here. I have to take the whole lathe apart to do it because it's in the way. I may drill a hole here and a hole on the other side, along with the foot here underneath the headstock, and I may put rubber adjustable mounts on it that are threaded. So instead of putting your rubber mounts underneath your bench on all four legs and then turning them to level the bench, well, you have a spiral level on it. And why do that? Because what I'm going to do is I'm going to put 4 in underneath on each side of my lathe at the front end and back end, and they're going to be adjustable. And so I'll be able to adjust the lathe itself completely level. Now, the only problem with that is that in order for those screws not to turn, when you're running it, because it's not bolted down, you have to figure out a way that they can't vibrate, and come loose or turn in the wrong direction and go in. So I will probably use Loctite thread locker and lock them in that way. And then what I'm going to do is the middle holes here, there's a hole in there inside here with a bolt through it, and the same at this end. So I'm going to level it first on those 4 adjustable legs that I've got here and on the other side and on this side and on the other side. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to lay it down on my bench, okay, and I'm going to level it on my bench with the adjustable threaded legs. Okay, so it's completely level. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to drill holes, or drill a hole through my bench on either end where the two holes are drilled to bolt the lathe down. And I'm going to bolt the lathe down on either end with bolts to hold the lathe in place with the adjustable legs on each side, all four adjusted, and that way it won't move, and it'll put the bolts put enough pressure holding the lathe down on those four pads, with the Loctite locking the pads position on my bench so the lathe's completely level. And those two bolts will be used so that the lathe can't move enough so that those threaded legs cannot unscrew, bringing the lathe out of alignment. But the Loctite will also be there to keep them that way. And then if I ever move the lathe and have it on some other bench, then all I got to do is add some propane heat to the legs, and they'll come loose. Okay, with the it'll melt the Loctite. Okay, and they'll just come right out. So that's what I'm planning on doing with this thing. So I mean, either way, you know, I'm going to get a headstock or a headstock spindle. The problem with the headstock spindle idea is simply that if I order it from AliExpress, I cannot tell if the spindle boss has been milled accurately until I put the new spindle back in the lathe and test it with the chuck on it and run a dial test indicator or an indicator. And if it's out, it means I got to take it out, take it off the bearings, package it, and send it back to AliExpress. So, you know, I'm not sure. It's a risk. I think it is. Like, I think the tailstock from AliExpress will be accurate. But I'm going to tell you something. Anybody can take that package and open it up in transit and, you know, take my spindle and mill it down just to screw me. And I got to tell you, I'm beginning to think that this seller has been politically motivated. And the only way you can see this is in my other videos that don't have, you know, a picture of the lathe. You'll see with a picture of my hat on or my kit, but don't look at those videos. Okay, you're going to throw up all over the lathe problem, well, because of the other videos, and I don't want you throwing up over the lathe problem for another reason. We have a big argument with Canada, a big criminal case. The federal government of Canada covered up every criminal act against my wife and our children and our property. And these crimes were committed by gangs and the police and the Nazis, and yeah, so it had to go to the Hague, to the criminal court in the Hague. But the government of Canada used corrupted connections to stop our case from being researched or investigated by the lead investigator at the Hague, named what the hell is his name? Mark P. Dillon. Okay. He was the investigator for the Miss Basuda, who was the former prosecutor of the ICC. You know, and Canada keeps pulling these stunts. People need to understand that Canada's parliament here, they're all gang members, all of them, and many of them are recruited Nazis. You saw them clap for Hunka, the Nazi SS. Well, there's more to that than you know. And one of the problems is some of the member states here, like Russia and China, and President Vladimir Putin, know that many on Parliament Hill and all the political parties, the NDP, Liberals, and the Conservatives, have been recruited by the Nazi SS. Okay, and I'm telling you this; these are absolute facts. And the Jewish community here, which I'm related to by blood, and they're, you know, their buddies, you know, Jewish Zionists who are MPs in our House of Commons with the Liberals and the Conservatives, they're refusing to tell it like it is. And I'm shocked. I mean, after Adolf Hitler and these Jewish MPs sit in the House of Commons here and all these parties, and they know that their parties then are Nazis, and have Nazi recruits, and they won't say anything. I mean, that's just, and I have all the evidence to prove it. So that may play a role in my lathe problem. It may not. But I'm starting to lean to the idea that it could be, but I don't really have enough evidence to prove it, only to state that it's very unusual for a seller and a John Doe manufacturer, unless they've been bought off to do this to me. I just frankly can't see China doing this. I just don't see it. I worked with Chinese business people from Canada in China and manufacturers for 5 or 10 years. So something is wrong with this. Anyway, go have a nice day. I wish all of you a happy Sabbath. I've got my menorah lit. If any of you are Jewish, you can see it there, or it's always lit on the Sabbath. I don't need to celebrate the Sabbath because I celebrate the Sabbath practically every day. I pray every day to God, and I pray to Him to punish Canada for all these terrible things they've done, including this mess here. So I don't know. One thing's for certain: I did buy the lathe through Canada, through Toronto, and I bought my milling machine from a company in Canada too. They didn't screw me on my milling machine. I've had it for 3 years, as I've said in a number of my videos, and I never made a warranty claim on it because it's perfect. I don't even need to tram the table, okay? Because I can check to see if my table's off simply by measuring my piece after I've milled it, okay? And I've done that. I've used a dial indicator on a flat surface that I've just milled with my milling machine, and it's perfect all the way across. It might be out by less than 1/100th of a 1,000th or something like that. That's how accurate this little milling machine is. I was really lucky when I got this one because it doesn't need to be trammed, and it's the one where you can swing the head over 45 degrees left to right. There's a big nut in the back of it. I've never moved that nut. And some guys on YouTube are saying don't buy the one with the nut on the back where it swings 45. Get a permanent 90 degree that you can adjust for a swing. I don't agree with them. I see guys on YouTube who are, they're putting these great big motors on this little milling machine. One guy put a 2 horsepower motor on one of these little milling machines. Guys are breaking gears and complaining. Plastic gears are crashing. I've had the same plastic gear in mine for 3 years, okay? These guys try to turn these little milling machines into, a knee mill, like a Bridgeport. You can't do that. You can't put a 2 horsepower on these things because, first of all, the spindle is not designed, okay, for that kind of cutting power. It's just not designed for it, okay? And plus, you're putting more weight on the headstock, all right, with these big giant motors. I think that is insanity. These guys are trying to do things, trying to turn these little milling machines into something they're not, and they do a great job. They just take a lot longer. You can't cut hard metals as much off as you can aluminum or 12L14. You can't cut as much off in one go. And yes, I've had to go back and forth with my arm 100 times. And by the end of the day, my arm is killing me from going back and forth and spinning the dial there. So, but, I have the patience to do it. As long as you don't try to force a machine past its limitations, the plastic gears will never break. This plastic gear in mine has never broken. I've had it for 3 years. I just don't push this machine. When I'm cutting 1018 steel, or I'm cutting tool steel with it, I might take off maybe 1/100th of an inch at a time. And I may have to take off up to 1/4 inch, okay? And I don't, I think the greatest thickness I can take off with this milling machine in 1018 is about 1/32nd of an inch. And even at that, this machine tells you when the gear's under a lot of stress, because what happens is when you try to take a thick cut off a piece of steel in this milling machine, what happens is as you're spinning the flute cutter through the material, okay, you're going to hear the gear. Its loudness is going to pick up substantially, and that's a warning to you that the gear is under a lot of stress, okay? I can cut, believe it or not, 1/16. Let's see, yeah, I can cut 1/16 off of 1018 with this milling machine, but at that point, at that thickness, it's working pretty hard, and that gear is really, it's really going. Usually if I try to cut that thick a cut, I got it in high gear, and so I'm running it at around 2,500 RPM, I would say, easy. Because if the thicker you're going to cut, you need to increase the speed of the flute cutter you have in the chuck. I use a chuck. I have. I might as well do a video. I have these. These are R8s. I think they're R8s. Yeah, bought a set of those from Amazon. Now you got to be careful with these, because I'm going to tell you something about these things. This keyway here that goes up into the keyway of your spindle of your milling machine. These, when you get these from China, they're really sharp here, brutally. I mean, really sharp, and that's no good. Okay, it can skin metal off of the key inside your head. So what I did is I took my mini grinder with a metal cutting disc on it, and I just angled it, and I went along these edges to flatten them. I didn't file it by hand. I only filed the end here where it's rounded at the top by hand, because I couldn't get in there with my disc. It might cut into here. So I did all of them, and when I got these were razor sharp, and I mean razor sharp. You just slide your thumb lightly on them, you need stitches. Yeah. And I have this little gizmo, which I showed in another video. It's I bought it from India on Amazon. This one here had some problems with it when I got it. The lead screw in here for this milling attachment for my 7x14, the lead screw was warped and it was sticking, but it turned out it wasn't the lead screw, it was the brass gib that they put in there. Okay, and the nice thing about the brass gib in there is that I stuck it onto a flat surface. I was able to very lightly tap it out because it was not straight, it was rounded, and that was causing the handle here, the dial to bind. This is a very good little attachment. I'm not kidding. You may have, if you get it and you have some problems with it, and there's an adjustment here on the side. You see those 3 grub screws in there. You need an Allen key for these. They're not really grub screws. Grub screws are the UK machinist term for these. But a grub screw in their case usually requires a tiny flathead screwdriver, whereas these have you need a little Allen key, and these adjust the tension of the lead screw, okay, through putting pressure on the gib, okay, just like your lathe or your milling machine. So, but this is a very good little tool, and I'm not kidding. It's not very big. Now, the problem I had with it is when I got it, you can only put stock in it it was under 2 inches, okay? And I wanted to put my steam engine cylinders that are 2 inches in height inside here, and it only went to about 1.5. So, and this here is my vise for it. My little vise goes on there. There's how it goes on. The two are a matched pair. But again, with my little milling vise, I can only hold material that's about an inch, maybe 1 3/4 inches at its maximum spread. This, by the way, when I got my milling machine 3 years ago, all I had was this. I milled only with this. Okay, didn't have a milling vise. I couldn't afford one. So, this is a very good little tool. Okay, yeah, it's not only applicable to 7x14s, although it's designed for them because it's a little guy, but you can mount a piece of steel on your cross slide of your 8x16 and to a height. And plus, you got to remember that you know, when you raise this up and down, you raise this whole thing up and down, so you can adjust the height of your piece inside this vise to reach the spindle. Now this is built for the 7x14. You don't need a block under it to give it more height for the 7x14, but you do in the case of the 8x16. Okay, but I highly recommend these. Don't buy them from Amazon because they're my enemy now for what they've done to me with this lathe. unless they changed their minds, and I gave them the option to do so in a comment, by the way. But if you can find these on eBay, buy one. They're really good. And even if you only have a drill press, these are really good on a drill press. You know, you can actually mill with a drill press, but the problem is with a drill press, when you try to go sideways instead of straight down, the spindle moves. Okay, you're going to get about 4,000 run out if you try to go sideways, but you can still mill with them. I mean, you can do some milling that's not required to be extremely accurate. You can very successfully do it with any drill press. You don't really have to modify it at all. If anything, you just put in a try and find a milling table for it, mount it to it, and find a way to jack it up to the spindle. But now, fortunately enough for me, I was out in the garbage the other day here at home, and I have a little drill press over there. You can see I don't use it anymore, just simply because it doesn't have a belt. But here's what happened. I went out in the garbage the other day. Someone left me a gift. There it is. That's another drill press. And it is more powerful than that one. And it's just rusty. Someone put it by the garbage. And the front thing on it's broken off. I'm going to glue it back on. And as you can see, it's rusty. It needs to be sanded and refinished. And that's going to be my drill press. It's all machinists also have a drill press. And this is my grinder. It's a Canadian Tire version. That is a 100 grit? Something like that. It's a greenstone for sharpening my lathe tools. And on the other end is my diamond thing. The problem is, here's my diamond for honing, for fine tuning my cutting tools for my lathe that have a welded on, welded on carbon ends on them. Okay, this is my the one I use for fine sharpening after I've ground them down to give them that extra little. The problem is I made an aluminum spindle for it, not this one, an aluminum one. And what happened was I used my 7x14 lathe where the saddle is off center. Oh no, something was off center. Was it the tailstock? I'm trying to remember what happened with that thing. Yeah. But anyway, I had an aluminum insert here that fits over the shaft of my grinder on the other end for this. And it was not exactly centered when I drilled it. So the whole grinder was vibrating up and down so badly on the table. I think you'd think it's an earthquake. So it's because of this. So I made a new one out of 1018. It's right here. I just have to drill a hole in it. I couldn't because I found out my spindle was out. That's why, and I gotta go.